Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable world of ancient Rome, a civilization that had the free time and confidence to test every substance on Earth to see what would happen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. When most people think of ancient Rome, they picture marble statues, stern senators, and philosophers walking around looking deeply disappointed in everyone. What they don't picture is an empire where half the citizens were wandering around the streets slightly buzzed, moderately euphoric, or spiritually convinced they'd just received a private message from Jupiter himself. But that's the version of Rome we're talking about tonight. The Rome that your history teacher absolutely chose violence by ignoring. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Rome was not a sober empire. Rome was the ancient world's experiment in, what if a superpower also behaved like a wine festival that somehow lasted 8 centuries? Wine wasn't just a drink in Rome. It was hydration, medication, social glue, emotional support, personality enhancement, and, judging by some of their emperors, possibly the foundation of national policy. And let's be honest, most Romans weren't drinking delicate little glasses of it. They were downing amphorae of wine that tasted like raisins, seawater, and decisions they would regret. This wine was also strong. Not a glass with dinner, strong. More, who needs dinner? Strong. And Romans, in their infinite curiosity, kept adding herbs, spices, flowers, resins, and whatever leaf happened to be growing near their feet. Mandrake? Sure. Henbane? Why not? If it made your vision swim slightly or helped you better understand the gods, the Romans considered it fair game. And they didn't stop at wine. Rome traded with everywhere. Greece, Egypt, Persia, meaning every suspicious plant, every mind-bending resin, every questionable herb arrived in Rome, like a gift basket from the universe saying, please use responsibly, which of course they did not. Temples weren't safe either. Priests stood above burning braziers, inhaling fumes like they were trying out for an ancient incense-powered rocket launch. Worshippers walked in for a nice, normal religious ceremony, and walked out convinced they'd had a meaningful conversation with a statue. If you ever wondered why Roman religion had so many visions, omens, and divine messages, now you know. The temples were basically hot boxes with better architecture. And yet, Romans acted like all of this was completely normal. Why wouldn't it be? You build roads, aqueducts, and the greatest army in the ancient world. And then you relax by mildly detaching from reality. Balance. Rome wasn't just an empire. It was the ancient world's largest, longest-running, are we sure this is a good idea? Experiment. And remarkably, it worked for them. If you think the Romans drank wine the way we drink wine, let me stop you right there. Roman wine was not a gentle, fruity beverage you sip while pretending to enjoy conversation. Roman wine was a biochemical experiment in a clay jar. It was strong, potent, and often tampered with so aggressively that modern health inspectors would have fainted on the spot. First, understand this. Romans did not drink wine straight. To them, drinking pure wine was barbaric, something only uncivilized foreigners or people with nothing left to lose would do. It was so strong that consuming it without dilution was basically saying, I would like to taste colors today. But watering it down didn't make it safer, because the Romans also loved adding flavor enhancers, which is ancient Roman for plants that should never ever be mixed with alcohol. They added spices like cinnamon and saffron, harmless enough, But then they kept going. They added myrrh. They added pitch. They added resin. They added herbs that ancient medical writers described with charming phrases like induces visions, loosens the mind, and opens the gates of sleep, which is historians speak for this is how you accidentally meet Jupiter. And then there was conditum paradoxum, the surprise wine. The surprise was hallucinations. This concoction mixed wine with honey, pepper, dates, saffron, spices, and sometimes a handful of plants that no one could pronounce, even then. It was the kind of drink that started as a harmless conversation piece and ended with someone loudly insisting they could hear the walls breathing, but Rome didn't stop there. Wealthy Romans competed to produce the strongest, strangest, or most interesting wines. If you wanted to impress dinner guests, you didn't serve good food, that was optional, but you definitely served wine that made them question their existence. Meanwhile, lower-class Romans drank whatever they could afford, which ranged from very cheap wine to wine that had been boiled, diluted, fermented twice, flavoured with seawater, or left outside so long it became an entirely new organism. The result? Everyone, rich, poor, senator, slave, philosopher, farmer, existed in a constant state of mild to moderate intoxication. Plato would have passed out. Leibniz would have left the party. The average Roman shrugged and asked for another cup. Because to Romans, wine wasn't just part of life. It was life. It was social glue, medicine, entertainment, stress relief, and occasionally a portal to the divine. Rome didn't run on discipline. Rome ran on wine so strong it could probably power a small engine. If you ever wondered what the Roman equivalent of a home medicine cabinet looked like, imagine something between a witch's pantry and a low-budget apothecary run by someone who clearly should not have been left unsupervised. Romans didn't keep simple painkillers on hand. No, they stocked plants that could either heal you, knock you out, or make you believe you'd ascended to a higher plane of existence. Sometimes all three at once. Let's start with henbane, a plant so potent that modern toxicologists look at it and say, please don't. Romans, however, said, perfect for wine. Henbane caused hallucinations, dizziness, strange dreams, and, if you took too much, a brief intermission from reality. It was used in love potions, sleep aids, and occasionally to make boring dinner parties feel less boring, because what improves social gatherings more than everyone collectively seeing things that aren't there? Then we have mandrake, the superstar of ancient psychoactive plants. Mandrake root contains alkaloids that cause vivid visions, numbness, and deep sleep. It was so powerful that writers warned people to tie a dog to the root and let the dog pull it out, because apparently the safest approach was to risk the dog instead of yourself. Romans used it to treat pain, infertility, melancholy, and also, judging by some surviving descriptions, boredom. If you took a little, you relaxed. If you took a bit more, you slept. If you took too much, you travelled to the afterlife for a quick visit. And then there was opium, the Roman cure-all. Got pain? Opium. Trouble sleeping? Opium. Stress? Opium. Sick of your neighbour's loud geese? Opium probably wouldn't solve that one, but Romans would have tried anyway. Opium was everywhere in Rome. In medicine, in rituals, in cosmetics, and possibly in half the conversations that felt philosophical, but were actually just two very relaxed people misunderstanding each other. But we're not done. Romans also experimented with nightshade, belladonna, poppy seeds, hemp, and whatever exotic plant merchants brought from the East with a sales pitch like, "This will change your life." And it usually did, though not always in the direction people hoped. The best part? Romans took these herbs with absolute confidence, no hesitation, no fear, no consult a physician before use. Their attitude was basically, if nature grew it, we're drinking it. Their herb cabinet wasn't medicine, it was a roulette wheel, and the Romans spun that wheel every day. If ancient Rome had a most likely to accidentally launch you into another dimension award, Mandrake would win it every single year. This plant wasn't just potent, it had a reputation. A terrifying, mystical, slightly dramatic reputation that Romans somehow interpreted as, great, let's boil it and drink it. Mandrake root looks vaguely like a human body, which, for Romans, was not a warning sign. It was an advertisement. They believed anything shaped like a human must be good for humans, which is the kind of logic you develop after drinking wine mixed with seawater. Mandrake was used for pain relief, anesthesia, sleep, love potions, and any situation where Romans wanted to temporarily leave the physical world behind and visit whatever Jupiter had going on that day. But the harvesting process? That was another story. Ancient writers warned that Mandrake shrieked when pulled from the ground, a shriek so deadly that anyone who heard it would drop dead, fall unconscious, or have an extremely bad day. Modern science has clarified that this is nonsense. But ancient Romans did not get the memo. They were committed to safety protocols. Their solution? Tie the root to a dog. Make the dog pull it out. Run very far away. Come back later and collect your prize. This was considered medically responsible. Once the mandrake was safely in human hands, and after offering the dog emotional support, Romans prepared it in several charming ways. They boiled it into potions. They mixed it with wine. They ground it into salves. They inhaled it as incense. At no point did any Roman say, "Perhaps this is too much." In fact, the main question was, how much can we get away with before we start seeing gods? And oh, did they see gods? Mandrake didn't just relax you, it transported you. Light doses caused drowsiness. Medium doses caused vivid dreams. Large doses gently tucked you into a temporary coma, the ancient equivalent of saying, "I'm going to disappear for a bit. Please don't touch my sandals." Roman doctors used mandrake during surgeries as anesthesia. Yes, anesthesia. While the patient drifted blissfully in and out of consciousness, surgeons got to work with bronze tools and a level of confidence we should all find deeply concerning. Mandrake was powerful, mystical, unpredictable, and absolutely beloved. It changed moods, altered perceptions, and opened the door to experiences Romans swore were spiritual, and modern people would call, "You've taken too much," in short. Mandrake was the Roman rocket ship, and many Romans were absolutely willing to board. If you've ever wondered how ancient Roman priests managed to speak with the gods, here's a secret your textbooks politely left out. Many temples were essentially beautifully decorated smoke chambers filled with mind-altering fumes, strong enough to make a stone statue reconsider its life choices. The priests weren't just spiritual leaders, they were the ancient world's most high-functioning hotbox survivors. Let's start with the temples themselves. Some were built over natural vents where gases seeped from underground. To a Roman, this meant divine presence. To a modern geologist, it means, do not inhale that. But inhale it they did, joyfully, reverently, and often while chanting hymns that probably sounded extra intense when the walls started to shimmer. Priests stood right above these vents, robes billowing in warm vapors that contained methane, ethylene, and other gases that give the human brain the gentle nudge needed to start seeing things that are absolutely not there. And because ancient people interpreted everything as divine symbolism, nobody stopped to ask whether the gods were speaking, or the fumes were, but even temples without natural gases weren't safe. Romans burned incense mixes that would terrify a modern health professional. These blends weren't just sweet-smelling resins like frankincense. They often included herbs with vision-enhancing properties, which is a very polite way of saying, "Congratulations, you're about to meet the gods, whether you like it or not." Take henbane, for example. Tossing it into a brazier didn't just make the room smell interesting. It made it alive. Worshippers described seeing floating lights, gods appearing in smoke, and hearing messages on the wind. Meanwhile, the priest, inhaling twice as much, probably had to grip the altar to avoid greeting Jupiter personally. And then there was the famed Oracle of Delphi, which the Romans later absorbed. Pilgrims travelled across continents to hear a priestess mutter cryptic prophecies while seated above a volcanic vent, releasing sweet-tasting psychoactive gases. People assumed she was divinely inspired. She was inspired, all right, just not by anything on Olympus. But the Romans didn't see any of this as questionable. It was tradition, revelation, a normal Saturday. Still, you have to admire them. They built marble temples, set the stage with incense, added a generous amount of mind-altering vapor, and called it religion. And in fairness, it worked. People left feeling enlightened, transformed, and occasionally confused about whether their vision was spiritual or just the fumes doing their job. In ancient Rome, spirituality wasn't just believed, it was inhaled. If you think modern parties get out of hand, allow me to gently escort you to ancient Rome's Dionysian and Bacchic festivals, where sobriety was not just uncommon, it was aggressively discouraged. These weren't celebrations, they were immersive, full-body spiritual raves powered by wine, music, chanting, questionable herbs, and an atmosphere that said, "The gods can judge us later." The Romans inherited these rituals from the Greeks, who worshipped Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and doing things you absolutely cannot explain to your neighbors the next morning. Rome renamed him Bacchus and said, "Perfect, let's make the parties louder." These festivals were designed to dissolve inhibitions, erase social status, and free participants from the crushing weight of Roman society, which, to be fair, involved taxes, war, political betrayal, and togas held together by hope. After months of disciplined Roman life, people didn't just want a break, they wanted divine chaos. And the ingredients? Oh, they were generous. Wine flowed like a river with boundary issues. Not casual sipping wine. We're talking the kind of wine that had been boiled, spiced, and enhanced with herbs chosen specifically for their mind-opening properties. Priests blessed it, musicians encouraged it. Philosophers probably pretended they were above it, until the third cup. But wine wasn't the only thing in play. Some rituals included psychoactive leaves, inhaled fumes, and incense mixtures, whose recipes remain suspiciously vague in surviving texts. Scholars love to say things like, participants entered altered states, which is the academic way of admitting that ancient Romans were vibing with the universe. There were drums, flutes, chanting, ecstatic dancing, and entire crowds moving in rhythmic waves under torchlight. At the peak of the night, participants claimed to feel Bacchus entering their bodies, guiding their movements, loosening their minds, and occasionally convincing them they were vines gently swaying in the wind. Meanwhile, a sober observer, if such a creature existed, probably looked on and thought, "This is why Rome needs curfews. These festivals blurred the line between religion and recreation." People attended to experience freedom, unity, spiritual release, and the kind of emotional catharsis that comes only from singing loudly while not entirely sure where the ground is. The Roman Senate eventually tried to ban or regulate these rituals, because they were too wild, which is an impressive statement coming from a government that casually hosted public executions as entertainment. But bans couldn't kill Bacchus. People wanted transcendence, liberation, and a night off from reality, and Bacchic rituals delivered. Rome had legions, laws, and discipline, but it also had parties powerful enough to make the gods blush. If you thought Rome's public festivals were wild, wait until you hear about the private ones: secret societies, nighttime ceremonies, ritual potions with ingredients politely described by historians as pharmacologically interesting. Welcome to the mystery cults, Rome's VIP lounges of spiritual transformation, where the dress code was robes and the guest list required secrecy, devotion, and occasionally a tolerance for altered states of consciousness. Mystery cults weren't fringe groups. They were incredibly popular among Romans who wanted a deeper, more emotional connection with the divine, something beyond the typical Roman sacrifice and go home routine. People sought meaning, comfort, transcendence, and apparently hallucinogenic beverages. The most famous of these groups was tied to the Eleusinian Mysteries, originally Greek but extremely fashionable among upper-class Romans. The centerpiece of the ritual was the kykion, a sacred drink whose recipe was vague, suspiciously vague. Ancient writers described it as barley-based, which sounds harmless, until modern scholars pointed out something intriguing. Barley is a perfect host for ergot, a fungus containing the chemical precursor to LSD. Yes, the potion might have been accidentally on purpose psychedelic. Pilgrims drank it after days of fasting, chanting, and sensory overload. The combination was basically a spiritual catapult. Participants spent the night in a dark temple undergoing visions described as life-changing, soul-purifying, and beyond human explanation, which is ancient Greek for "I'm having a moment." Rome also hosted the Orphic Mysteries, which offered salvation, reincarnation, purification, and, depending on the recipe, a mild to moderate dissociation from the physical world. Their rituals involved torches, music, ecstatic movement, and secret hymns that made people feel like they were drifting between realms. And then there were the Isis Mysteries, imported from Egypt. These ceremonies featured incense thick enough to qualify as fog, rhythmic chanting, and music that vibrated through the floor. Initiates described meeting the goddess Isis in visions. Modern historians gently suggest they might have been meeting a combination of incense fumes, exhaustion, and whatever herbs snuck their way into the ritual wine. All mystery cults shared a key ingredient: experience. They weren't passive, polite temple visits. They were immersive journeys meant to break ordinary consciousness and rebuild it with divine meaning. Altered states weren't side effects, they were features. The best part? Members were sworn to secrecy, so our sources range from life-changing revelation to "I legally cannot tell you what happened," which is the historical equivalent of someone saying, "Last night was crazy, but I signed an NDA." Mystery cults weren't just spiritual movements. They were Rome's hidden gateways to transcendence, spiritual, emotional, and occasionally chemical. If ancient Rome had a universal solution to life's problems, it wasn't philosophy, it wasn't discipline, and it certainly wasn't stoicism. It was opium, the Roman equivalent of a sleep button, a painkiller, a mood stabilizer, and a temporary vacation from reality, all rolled into one tiny poppy-derived miracle. Opium wasn't rare. It wasn't exotic. It wasn't hidden behind temple doors or guarded by priests with torches. It was normal, almost disturbingly normal. Romans kept it in their homes the way modern people keep bandages or cough syrup. If you walked into a Roman household and didn't see some form of poppy extract lying around, you'd probably assume you were in the wrong home. Doctors, and I use that term generously, prescribed opium for nearly everything. Headaches, toothaches, fevers, broken bones, grief, melancholy, insomnia, boredom, and the emotional burden of living in an empire where someone might stab you in the forum for looking too confident. If you had a problem, opium had an opinion about it, and Roman doctors didn't hold back. They mixed opium with wine, honey, spices, and occasionally herbs that would make a modern pharmacist faint. They administered it as a drink, a pill, a salve, or, if you were unlucky, a suppository. They didn't care how it got into your system, as long as it got into your system. But opium wasn't reserved for the sick. Soldiers used it to endure long marches and painful wounds. Mothers used it to sleep after putting their children to bed. Philosophers used it to think deeply, which is ancient Roman for stare at a wall and hope the universe reveals its secrets. Even poets used it to inspire creativity, which explains a lot about Roman poetry. The effects? Oh, they were glorious. At least from the Roman point of view. Light doses relaxed the body and softened pain. Medium doses brought warmth, euphoria, and the sudden belief that you were wiser than everyone in the room. High doses tucked you into a dream-heavy sleep so deep you could miss several major political assassinations and wake up refreshed. But, as always, Rome took things too far. Some wealthy Romans developed a taste for stronger preparations, which is ancient historian language for, please stop doing that. Your soul is trying to leave your body. Opium dependency existed long before modern medicine recognized the word. Still, Romans never blamed the opium. They blamed fate, or the gods, or the stressful nature of empire building. Opium wasn't just a medicine. It was Rome's emotional crutch, spiritual pacifier, and universal reset button. When life got too loud, Romans pressed the poppy. If Mandrake was the Roman rocket ship, and opium was the Roman sleep button, then henbane was the Roman... Why did we ever think this was a good idea? Henbane was one of those plants that absolutely everyone should have left alone, which of course meant the Romans embraced it with enthusiasm and optimism, bordering on delusion. Henbane looked innocent enough, a leafy green plant with pale flowers and a mildly sinister vibe. But every part of it, seeds, leaves, stems, roots, contained alkaloids capable of rearranging your perception of reality like a bored god reorganizing furniture. Modern toxicologists warn against touching it. Romans looked at it and said, let's mix it with wine. Why? Because it made people feel relaxed, euphoric, dreamy, and occasionally convinced that they were floating 3 inches above the ground. Henbane didn't create gentle visions. It created hallucinogenic chaos, the kind where someone might spend half an hour having a polite conversation with a clay statue. Romans used henbane in 3 main ways. As a sedative. Doctors gave it to people who were anxious, sleepless, or frankly, too loud. A cup of henbane wine would quiet anyone, sometimes a little too well, requiring relatives to nudge the sleeper periodically to confirm they were still among the living, as a recreational enhancer. Some Romans enjoyed small doses before parties, claiming it helped them relax. Relax, in this case, meaning stare at a wall and whisper secrets to it. As a medicinal ingredient in eye drops, yes, eye drops. Rome truly did not fear consequences. What made henbane especially dangerous was its inconsistency. 2 leaves might make you pleasantly drowsy. 3 could send you into a philosophical debate with a passing cloud. 4 might briefly transport you to the afterlife for a quick tour. Roman medical texts included helpful warnings like, "Do not exceed the appropriate dose," without specifying what the appropriate dose actually was. And yet, Romans kept using it. Even Roman soldiers carried henbane mixtures, not for bravery, but for pain relief. Nothing says centurion morale like a legion marching across Gaul with half the troops quietly hallucinating friendlier landscapes. Henbane didn't discriminate either. Rich, poor, free, enslaved, anyone could take too much and suddenly find themselves spiritually communing with a candle. But Rome never blamed the plant. Rome blamed human error, fate, or bad luck. Henbane is safe, they'd say, as long as you're careful. Which is the Roman way of saying, we've learned nothing. Henbane wasn't a tool, it was a dare, and Romans accepted it every time. If you ever find yourself thinking, ancient Roman parties were probably classy and refined, I regret to inform you that you have been catastrophically misled. Yes, there were marble dining couches, golden cups, musicians, and servants carrying trays of delicacies. But beneath all that elegance was something far less refined. Rooms deliberately filled with psychoactive vapors that made guests feel relaxed, euphoric, blissful, or lightly disconnected from the boundaries of time. Wealthy Romans didn't just host dinners, they curated experiences. And nothing said elite gathering like heating scented oils over bronze burners until the room filled with perfumed clouds thick enough to qualify as weather. Some of these oils contained rose, cinnamon, myrrh, or cardamom. Lovely, harmless, respectable ingredients. Others contained plants that ancient writers described with charming phrases like induces forgetfulness, loosens the limbs, or promotes visions, which is historian language for please ventilate your home. Guests reclined on cushioned couches as attendants warmed braziers, poured aromatic oils over glowing coals, and let sweet smoke drift lazily across the room. The wealthy called this elite relaxation. A modern fire safety inspector would call it a series of poor decisions. Some hosts preferred kaifi, an Egyptian incense blend containing raisins, honey, wine, herbs, and, depending on the recipe, ingredients with mild narcotic effects. Others imported exotic resins from Arabia that produced a gentle floating sensation when inhaled in closed spaces. There were even accounts of Romans mixing hallucinogenic herbs into their burners, creating a fragrant haze that made guests feel philosophical, emotional, and extremely interested in the ceiling. And then there were the steam rooms, because of course Rome had steam rooms. Wealthy bathhouses vaporized oils and herbs for health benefits, but let's be honest, if you sit in a sealed stone chamber filled with steaming psychoactive botanicals for long enough, you're not just getting healthier, you're getting transported. These fumigated environments weren't accidental. Hosts calibrated them carefully. Enough aroma to impress, enough warmth to relax, enough mystery to spark wild dinner conversations. A slightly disoriented guest was considered a compliment. If someone lost track of what century it was, even better. That meant the party was a success. Imagine reclining beside flickering lamps, the air heavy with scented smoke, wine in hand, surrounded by half-drunk philosophers arguing about the stars while everyone slowly drifts into an incense-fueled dream state. That wasn't an unusual Roman evening. That was Tuesday. Fumigation wasn't decoration. It was entertainment, invisible, fragrant, and occasionally strong enough to make guests question whether the floor was moving. If you ever feel concerned about modern medicine, just remember, at least your doctor isn't a Roman. Ancient Roman physicians practiced a special blend of creativity, confidence, and catastrophic guesswork that somehow passed as science for centuries. And when it came to mind-altering substances, Roman doctors didn't just prescribe them, they celebrated them. Their medical motto might as well have been, "If it grows and doesn't immediately kill you, it's medicinal." Let's start with the basics. Romans believed that nearly every ailment, physical, emotional, existential, could be solved by combining wine with whatever plant happened to be nearby. Fever, wine with poppy extract; insomnia, wine with mandrake; toothache, wine with henbane; stress from political chaos, food shortages, or unpredictable emperors, wine with more wine. Roman medical texts casually describe these mixtures as soothing, relaxing, or helpful for clearing the mind, which is suspiciously poetic language for substances that had people temporarily forgetting their own names. And Roman doctors gave these treatments with the serenity of someone who had never once questioned their life choices. Take sleep medicine, for example. Modern sleep aids come with dosage instructions, side effects, and long warnings. Roman sleep aids came in clay cups labelled, "Trust me, I'm a physician." A typical Roman sedative could include opium, mandrake, saffron, and a nice splash of strong wine. Patients didn't so much fall asleep as depart, and painkillers, those were even more dramatic. Roman surgeons used mandrake and opium to knock out patients before procedures. It worked, sort of. The patient would be unconscious, but also potentially having vivid visions of the underworld while surgeons casually operated with bronze tools and reassuring comments like, "Try to lie still." But Roman doctors didn't stop at ingestion. They made topical treatments too. Balms, salves, ointments rubbed directly onto the skin. These mixtures often contained psychoactive herbs that seeped into the bloodstream and made patients both physically numb and spiritually confused. Imagine going in for muscle pain and coming home convinced you had briefly floated above your own body. And for emotional distress, Romans prescribed perfumes infused with narcotics, incense burners with calming vapors, or long baths steeped in herbs that would make a modern herbalist scream into a pillow. The best part? Everyone acted like this was perfectly normal. The doctor, the patient, the neighbors, all nodding in approval as though hallucinating mildly during treatment was simply part of the healing process. In Rome, medicine wasn't just about curing illness. It was about temporarily relocating your consciousness while the illness figured out what to do next. If ancient Rome had a most unpredictable substance award, mushrooms would accept it proudly, or possibly refuse it because it was hallucinating the podium. Mushrooms were the great wild cards of the Roman world, sometimes delicious, sometimes deadly, sometimes spiritually enlightening, and sometimes capable of sending an emperor straight to the afterlife. In other words, the perfect ingredient for Roman curiosity. Romans loved mushrooms. They cultivated them, collected them, cooked them, traded them, and boasted about them at dinner parties. But here's the problem. Ancient Rome did not have mushroom identification guides. They did not have trained mycologists. They had enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is a dangerous replacement for expertise. Some mushrooms were harmless and tasty. Others were so toxic that a single bite could turn a feast into a funeral. The infamous Amanita phalloides, better known as the death cap, grew happily across the empire, and had an unfortunate resemblance to several edible varieties. This caused events, but Romans being Romans, they didn't stop to reconsider. Instead, they expanded their mushroom adventures. They experimented, they tasted, they infused mushrooms into stews, sauces, and wines. And some Romans went further. They sought out mushrooms believed to have mind-altering effects, ones that induced visions, dreams, spiritual clarity, or in some cases miscommunications with furniture. Wealthy elites, always eager to outdo each other, served rare mushroom dishes at banquets. The rarer the mushroom, the more impressed the guests. But rare didn't always mean safe. In fact, one emperor, Claudius, famously died after eating mushrooms his wife prepared. Ancient gossip pretty much says, yes, she absolutely poisoned him, but either way, mushrooms played a starring role in imperial drama. Some Romans believed certain mushrooms could bring you closer to the gods, that their effects were not poisonous but divine. These mushrooms, when dried, boiled, or mixed with wine, created experiences described as dreamlike, vision-inducing, or a conversation with destiny, depending on how poetic the writer felt. Did all these mushrooms have actual psychedelic properties? Not all, but some likely did. Rome had access to regions in the Alps, Balkans, and the Near East where psychoactive species grew. Travelers brought stories of dream mushrooms, night mushrooms, and laughing mushrooms that caused uncontrollable joy. Naturally, Romans wanted to try them. What better way to spice up a festival, a dinner, or a philosophical debate? Still, mushrooms had a reputation for danger. They were the culinary Russian roulette of ancient Rome, a delightful surprise or an immediate tragedy. But this didn't stop Romans. It encouraged them. Nothing appealed more to Roman sensibilities than a food that combined luxury, risk, and the possibility of glimpsing the divine. Mushrooms weren't just food. They were mystery, they were thrill, they were temptation. In Rome, even dinner could alter reality. When you picture gladiators stepping into the arena, you probably imagine discipline, grit, and raw physical power. What you don't imagine is a handful of them entering the Colosseum, slightly buzzed, mildly sedated, or spiritually convinced the lions were large house cats. But welcome to Rome, where even the most brutal profession occasionally intersected with the empire's favorite recreational substances. Gladiators were elite athletes, but they were also property, expensive property. Their owners wanted them alive, profitable, and entertaining. So before fights, some gladiators received herbal mixtures designed to enhance performance. Others received sedatives designed to ease anxiety. And occasionally a poor soul received something that made the arena look like a dreamscape painted by a confused god. One common preparation? Poppy-based tonics. These weren't full opium doses. The lanista, trainer owner, wasn't trying to knock them unconscious, but light mixtures intended to calm nerves, dull pain, and stop the gladiator from panicking at the sight of a very hungry, very athletic lion. The goal was simple: get them into the arena in a state of focused confidence, not existential dread. Of course, Rome being Rome, the results varied. A lightly dosed gladiator might feel courageous, steady, and ready for fame. A moderately dosed gladiator might feel strangely philosophical and attempt to negotiate with his opponent. And a heavily dosed gladiator might walk into the arena with the serene calm of someone who believes destiny has already been decided. Because in their mind, it probably had. But not all substances were calming. Some trainers experimented with stimulating herbs intended to increase aggression. These concoctions often included bitter extracts, pungent spices, or questionable leaves imported from foreign traders who absolutely exaggerated their benefits. A gladiator might enter the arena pumped with adrenaline, energy, and absolutely no idea what he was actually swinging at. And then there were the rare, whispered cases of hallucinogenic herbs making their way into pre-fight mixtures. No trainer would ever admit this, but a few ancient writers mention fighters who swung at shadows, bowed to invisible gods, or charged confidently toward lions they believed were symbols rather than teeth-equipped realities. But in fairness, the arena was terrifying. If a small herbal courage boost helped someone face down a rhinoceros imported just for entertainment, who can blame them? The crowd never knew, of course. They assumed gladiators were fueled by bravery, discipline, and raw Roman spirit. Meanwhile, backstage, someone might have been whispering, "Drink this. Don't ask what's in it. Good luck." The arena wasn't just blood and sand. Sometimes it was wine, herbs, and just a hint of altered perception. If ordinary Romans experimented with herbs and intoxicating fumes, then the emperors, with unlimited wealth, unlimited ego, and absolutely no adult supervision, took things to an entirely different level. Being emperor meant you had access to the best wines, the rarest plants, and a palace staff whose full-time job was to nod politely when you asked for a beverage that would make a philosopher cry. Let's start with Caligula, a man who lived his life like a dare. Caligula reportedly enjoyed potent wine mixtures spiced with exotic ingredients, some stimulating, some sedative, and some that modern historians describe as pharmacologically concerning. These concoctions fueled his late-night parties, bizarre decisions, and his general approach to governance, which resembled a fever dream more than a political strategy. Then there was Nero, a man famous for performing poetry, starting fires, allegedly, and believing he was the greatest artist the world had ever seen. A belief surely strengthened by the mind-altering incense burned in his extravagant dining halls. Nero's parties involved perfumed vapors released from hidden ceiling panels, rare foreign wines infused with herbs, and musicians who played for hours while guests slowly drifted into pleasantly numbed states. If you left the party still aware of what century it was, Nero considered it a failure. But no emperor embraced chemical curiosity like Hadrian, who travelled the empire collecting strange plants the way other rulers collected taxes. He consulted healers, magicians, and herbalists from distant provinces, each offering extracts, potions, and brews of insight. Some were mild relaxants. Others were, according to surviving notes, capable of inducing dreams of remarkable clarity, which is ancient world code for "you are about to meet your spirit animal." Even emperors with calmer reputations weren't immune. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher-emperor, relied heavily on theriac, a potent herbal compound containing opium. He took it for pain relief, though it surely didn't hurt that it also helped him tolerate the Roman Senate, which was enough to drive any sober man to spiritual reconsideration. And then we have the imperial physicians. These weren't conservative practitioners. They encouraged emperors to try rare roots, enchanted herbs, and imported powders from Arabia, Persia, and India. Every new plant was a possibility, a miracle, a danger, a conversation starter. The result? The emperors of Rome lived in a surreal cocktail of stress, power, creativity, paranoia, and occasionally, whatever potion their physician brewed that morning. When you rule the largest empire on earth, reality can feel heavy, and Roman emperors, being human, occasionally chose to lighten it with substances strong enough to make the gods raise an eyebrow. After wandering through Rome's vineyards, temples, bathhouses, apothecaries, and occasionally questionable kitchens, one thing becomes absolutely clear. The ancient Romans were not merely curious about altered states. They treated them like a national pastime. Rome's legacy isn't just roads, aqueducts, and Latin grammar. It's also a surprisingly long list of substances, rituals, fumes, brews, potions, and plants that collectively scream, "This empire stayed busy." The Romans weren't reckless. Not exactly. They were explorers. Not explorers of geography, well, those too, but explorers of consciousness. While legions marched across continents, Roman citizens marched boldly into the frontier of, what happens if we drink this? And more often than not, the answer was, something we should probably not write down. And yet, they did write some of it down. Ancient medical texts, Temple inscriptions, plays, poems, gossip, and scandalous biographies all reveal a civilization deeply entangled with substances that changed how they saw the world, and sometimes how the world saw them. Wine, for example, wasn't just a drink, it was infrastructure. Medicine wasn't just treatment, it was experimentation. Religion wasn't just worship, it was immersion. From opium-laced balms to incense-induced revelations, Rome approached altered states with the same ambition it brought to everything else, boldly, artistically, and with minimal concern for future side effects. The most fascinating part, Romans didn't judge each other for any of this. Intoxication wasn't taboo. It was a tool for healing, pleasure, spirituality, philosophy, courage, or simply getting through a long day involving unruly geese, hostile neighbours, or political betrayals. Even the empire's greatest minds were not exempt. Stoic philosophers debated fate while potentially influenced by sleep potions. Emperors wrestled with existential questions while inhaling imported incense strong enough to make the furniture sway. The average Roman citizen ended their workday with wine that would legally require warning labels today. And despite all this, or perhaps because of it, Rome endured. It thrived. It influenced the world for millennia. Rome's relationship with intoxication wasn't a flaw. It was a reflection of humanity, the desire to escape, explore, connect, numb, celebrate, expand, dream. We often imagine ancient people as stern, disciplined, and serious. But Rome reminds us that they laughed, danced, experimented, made mistakes, took risks, and sometimes got higher than anyone studying for a modern history exam will ever suspect. Their roads crumble, their temples fall, their emperors fade into legend, but their stories, the honest, chaotic human stories, remain. And among those stories is this undeniable truth. Ancient Romans got higher than we were ever taught to believe. If you're a medieval crossbowman, your day begins with the warm, comforting knowledge that half of Europe wants you banned, excommunicated, or preferably launched off a battlement. And that's before you've even had breakfast. The longbowmen look at you like you're cheating, the knights look at you like you're ruining their whole invincible aristocrat thing, and the church occasionally threatens eternal damnation because apparently your weapon is too good at its job. Congratulations, you're officially medieval DLC. You roll out of your straw mattress, which smells like the stable because it was a stable, and immediately check the most important thing in your life, your crossbow. Not your shoes, not your hair, not whether your clothes have new fleas. No, your crossbow. Because unlike a sword, which you can just swing around and hope for the best, a crossbow is a delicate, moody machine that refuses to work if so much as a raindrop looks at it the wrong way. This is where your morning stress begins. Humidity? Enemy. Morning dew? Enemy. Slightly damp air because someone sneezed nearby? Enemy. If the string gets wet, it becomes as useless as a knight trying to fight stairs. So you keep it wrapped, tucked, covered, and protected like it's your firstborn child. Breakfast, if you can call it that, usually consists of whatever the camp hasn't already eaten, lost, or accidentally dropped into the fire. Maybe some bread, maybe some onions, maybe something that used to be bread but is now more weapon than food. Doesn't matter. You choke it down because accuracy requires calories, and because you don't know when the next meal will happen. While the camp wakes up, you start winding your bow. Yes, winding. Because firing a crossbow isn't glamorous. You don't get to pull back the string with your mighty arms like some heroic figure on a tapestry. No, you get a crank, or a stirrup, or a goat's foot lever, each one specifically designed to make you look like a man assembling furniture wrong. And as you crank, you hear the longbowmen muttering under their breath. They hate that you can train peasants to use your weapon in a week. They hate that your bolt can go through armor. They hate that knights fear you. And secretly you enjoy every second of it, because you're a crossbowman, and by lunchtime, someone important will be terrified of you. If you think the life of a crossbowman is glamorous, it's time to lower your expectations. Preferably all the way down to the mud where you'll be kneeling, sweating, and loading your stubborn medieval machine one crank at a time, while other soldiers wake up and immediately start swinging swords around like enthusiastic toddlers. You begin your day with mechanical engineering. A crossbow shot isn't draw, aim, release. It's draw, crank, curse under your breath, adjust, crank again, pray the string doesn't snap, and then, maybe, release. Let's start with the loading process, which is basically a full-body workout disguised as warfare. First, you wedge your foot into the stirrup at the front of the bow. Then you bend forward like you're about to pick up the world's angriest goat. You pull the string back or attach your goat's foot lever, and you start cranking. Slowly, painfully, loudly. Every enemy within a mile now knows you're here, but that's fine because they're all terrified of the bolt that comes after the embarrassing part. Once the string is cocked, you place the bolt in the groove, carefully, because nothing ruins your day like fumbling the shot and having your expensive, precious bolt fall into the dirt where you now have to dig for it, like a desperate chicken scratching for seeds. Meanwhile, the longbowmen have already loosed 5 arrows each and are pretending not to judge you. But here's the thing, you don't need speed, you deal in certainty. Longbowmen spray the battlefield with arrows, hoping one finds a target. You, on the other hand, take your sweet time because when you shoot, something important usually dies. Armor? Doesn't matter. A well-placed bolt can punch through plate like a medieval uninstall button. Knights know this, which is why they keep asking God to smite you personally. Of course, none of this matters if someone charges you mid-crank. A crossbowman caught reloading is about as dangerous as a wet towel. That's why you always position yourself behind pavises, giant shields stuck into the ground, or behind infantry who hopefully like you enough not to abandon you. So you keep cranking, loading and aiming, hoping the string stays dry, the bolt flies straight, and fate gives you enough time to do what crossbowmen do best, end something valuable with unnerving precision, and all before lunch. If you're a crossbowman, you quickly learn one universal truth. Everyone wants you dead first. Knights see you as a walking armor-piercing tragedy waiting to happen. Archers see you as the overpowered pay-to-win class. Even your own side looks at you funny, because they know if the enemy has crossbowmen too, you're about to reenact the world's slowest duel. This is why pavises, giant shields planted into the ground, become your best friends, emotional support companions, and sometimes your only reason for surviving past breakfast. They're huge, heavy, awkward, and about as portable as a barn door, but they keep you alive. You and the pavisier, the poor soul whose job is carrying it, form a sacred duo. The shooter and the shield man. A medieval buddy cop film, except nobody's witty, and everyone smells like smoke and damp wool. Here's how it works. You crouch behind the pavies like a gremlin, hiding from daylight, while your partner holds it steady against incoming arrows. You then begin the long, humiliating process of loading the crossbow. The pavisier gets the pleasure of hearing every crank, grunt, and muttered insult as you wind the mechanism. And when you're finally ready to shoot, you pop out from behind cover, unleash a bolt that ruins someone's entire lineage, and dive back behind the shield, hoping your armor is still intact. Coordination between you and your pavisier is everything. If he tilts the shield too early, you get peppered with arrows. If he tilts it too late, you shoot the back of the shield. which earns you the kind of stare usually reserved for people who borrow money and never repay it. You're a team, an odd, muddy, perpetually stressed team, but a team nonetheless. The battlefield itself only makes things worse. Arrows fall like angry rain. Longbowmen target you specifically because they know exactly how dangerous you are. And knights, well, knights take it personally. The thought of their expensive, shiny armor, handcrafted by master smiths, being pierced by a guy with a crank, turns them into galloping, vengeful projectiles. That's why positioning is everything. You're not front line, you're not midline. You exist in the comfortable backline behind sturdy shields and expendable infantry, where you can pick off enemies while loudly insisting everyone stay between you and anything sharp. Because in the end, the daily life of a crossbowman isn't just about shooting, it's about surviving the 30 seconds between shots. A crossbowman's entire sense of self-worth can be boiled down to one beautiful moment: the thunk of a bolt hitting exactly where it shouldn't. Knights call it ungodly, bishops call it barbaric, you call it Tuesday. Let's talk about bolts. They're not arrows. They're smaller, heavier, and shaped with the same subtlety as a roofing nail. Each one is designed to punch through armor like a medieval tax collector, slow, inevitable, and extremely painful. You don't fire them to intimidate people. You fire them to end arguments. But the magic isn't just the bolt, it's the power behind it. The crossbow stores more energy than any human arm could deliver. That means even the knight who spent 10 months' wages on a fancy chest plate isn't safe. In fact, he's your favorite target. There's something deeply satisfying about watching a heavily armored noble, who trained his entire life to dominate the battlefield, get taken down by one precise shot from a man who trained for one intensely frustrating week. Armorers, of course, despise you. They spent hours shaping plates, riveting steel, polishing curves, only for your bolt to treat the entire suit like it's made of butter left too long in the sun. Some armorers even demanded extra pay just to fix crossbow damage. They claimed it felt like watching you write graffiti on the Mona Lisa. Accuracy is your pride and joy. You don't spray arrows into the wind like a longbowman who hopes probability will eventually take pity on him. No, you wait, you breathe, you aim. You pick out a specific knight, the one shouting too confidently or waving his sword like he owns the place. Then you send a bolt directly at his chest, knee, or if you're feeling extra medieval, his horse. The battlefield goes quiet for half a second. Not literally, but mentally. A moment of collective shock, like everyone's brains need time to process what just happened. Knights often look down at the bolt sticking out of them as if asking, "Is this allowed?" And the papacy's historical outrage answers, "Absolutely not. But you're doing it anyway." The truth is simple. Your weapon changes warfare. Castles fear it. Armies adjust for it. Tactics evolve around it. And somewhere on the horizon, a knight contemplates how unfair life is. Because when a crossbowman fires, he doesn't just hit a target, he hits an entire social hierarchy. If swords hate armor and knights hate logic, then crossbows hate weather. All of it. Sunshine, too hot. Rain, a catastrophe. Fog, moisture, snow, wet, dew, wet, humidity, wet. Anything that even thinks about being damp is your sworn adversary. You're not just a soldier, you're a full-time meteorologist with anxiety. Because your string, the delicate, temperamental diva that it is, absolutely refuses to perform unless conditions are perfect. One raindrop, one bead of condensation, one poorly timed sneeze from the guy next to you, and the string loosens, slows, or snaps. And if it snaps, congratulations, you're now holding a very expensive wooden club. This is why crossbowmen develop weather paranoia. You see a single cloud drifting lazily across the sky and immediately start wrapping your weapon like a mother shielding her newborn. Everyone else thinks it's a perfectly normal morning. You look at the horizon like doom approaches. Rain is the worst. Not because you'll melt, though given medieval hygiene, many crossbowmen probably smelled like they were already half melted, but because rain turns your job into a tragic theatre production. You try to keep your crossbow dry by tucking it under your cloak, which makes you look like a medieval man desperately hiding a forbidden pet. Meanwhile, longbowmen are out there firing through the weather like woodland psychopaths, soaking wet but annoyingly functional. Then there's mud. Mud gets everywhere. In the mechanisms, the bow, the latch, your boots, your sole. You try to crank your bow, and instead of a satisfying click, you get the gritty, grinding noise of sand, dirt, and despair. It's like loading a weapon that's slowly turning into a swamp creature. Wind is another nuisance. Bolts don't care for dramatic gusts, so you end up adjusting your aim with the seriousness of a scientist, while your infantry friends shout things like, "Just shoot already," as if physics is optional. Snow? Snow is deceptive. It looks dry. It feels dry. Then it melts, and suddenly your crossbow string is basically cooked spaghetti. You spend half the battle rubbing it with animal fat, cloth, prayers, and whatever dry thing you can find, usually nothing. And through all this suffering, your commander expects perfection. Because even when the sky is falling apart, even when everything you own is wet, clogged, frozen, or cursed, you still only get one shot every few minutes, and it better count. If firing a crossbow is the glorious part of your life, marching is the deeply unglamorous, soul-crushing majority of it. Marching as a crossbowman isn't elegant, disciplined, or inspiring. It's a miserable test of endurance while carrying gear specifically designed to ruin your spine. Let's start with the weight. Your crossbow is heavy. Your bolts are heavy. Your pavis, if you're unlucky enough to help carry it, is heavy enough to qualify as a building material. Your armor? Also heavy. By the time you're fully packed, you're less a soldier and more a medieval pack mule with performance anxiety. And then you walk, and walk, and walk. Through mud thick enough to drown a goat. Through forests full of roots specifically positioned to trip you. Through villages where children point at you like you're some sort of traveling circus attraction. It's not glamorous, it's not noble, it's just feet, blisters, and the slow realization that every step is an argument with gravity. Longbowmen love to mock you during marches, because their bows are light and their quivers hold dozens of airy sticks instead of metal-tipped bolts. They bounce along the road with suspicious cheerfulness, probably because they're excited to bully you again later. Meanwhile, you're sweating through your tunic, clinging to your gear like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Every crossbowman masters one essential survival technique, shifting the weight around to pretend it's lighter. Shoulder carry, hip carry, underarm carry, over the back carry, hug to the chest carry. You rotate through positions every 10 minutes just to keep your arms from mutiny. No matter how you hold it, something hurts. Then there's the logistical nightmare of marching with a weapon that absolutely cannot get wet. Clouds form. You panic. Drizzle starts. You panic harder. You end up walking with your crossbow tucked inside your cloak, and now you look like you're protecting either a weapon or a very lumpy baby. Either way, it's not comfortable. Commanders yell constantly, "Keep formation! Stop dragging your feet! Don't fall behind!" Easy for them. They're on horseback, dry, elevated, and not carrying a portable siege weapon in their arms. You, meanwhile, are developing a relationship with suffering that borders on romantic. And when you finally arrive at your destination, soaked in sweat, dirt, and existential dread, the nights ride past you, fresh as daisies, loudly reminding everyone how important they are. But none of them can do your job. None of them can put down an armored enemy with one precise bolt. And that's why you march, because at the end of all this walking, you're the one who changes the battle. The moment a battle begins, every crossbowman feels the same familiar mix of terror and reluctant professionalism. You're not a knight galloping forward with bravado. You're not a longbowman firing a barrage like a caffeinated wood elf. You're something far more stressful. A soldier with a single shot that must matter. It starts with the sound. Shields clashing, horses snorting, commanders shouting orders no one can actually hear. You, meanwhile, are crouched behind a pavis trying to psych yourself up for the most nerve-wracking 30 seconds of your day. The first crank is always the worst. Your hands shake, your breath quivers. You try to look composed, but inside you're spiritually screaming. Then comes the first volley, theirs. Arrows whistle overhead like angry insects on a mission. You duck instinctively, even though your pavis is doing its job. You peek out just long enough to spot targets. Knights grouping up, infantry advancing, archers taking position. You choose carefully. You're not firing for fun. You're firing with malice and intent. Crank, 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 bolt in, aim. And in that brief moment, the heartbeat before release, you become calm. You focus on one visor, one breastplate seam, one arrogant knight shouting orders, like he's definitely not about to regret it. You pull the trigger. The bolt flies with that signature thunk that feels like destiny leaving your hands. Maybe you hit a knight straight in the chest. Maybe you drop a standard bearer and throw their formation into chaos. Maybe you ruin a horse's afternoon. Whatever the outcome, someone's very bad day can now be traced back to you. But you don't get to admire your work. Oh no. You drop back behind the shield and begin the painfully slow reload while the entire universe attempts to kill you. Knights charge. Infantry shout. Arrows rain. And you're busy winding a crank like you're assembling a piece of furniture nobody asked for. Sometimes the enemy realizes what you are and targets you specifically. Crossbowmen are high-priority threats, which is flattering in a terrifying sort of way. It means you did your job right. It also means you now need to reload faster than your fingers are emotionally prepared for. And so the cycle continues. Shoot, hide, crank, sweat, repeat. Battle is chaos for everyone else. For a crossbowman, it's a sequence of carefully timed panic attacks punctuated by moments of deadly accuracy. And the most stressful thing is knowing. Your next shot always needs to be even better than your last. If you ever want to understand pure medieval fear, stand on a battlefield as a crossbowman and watch a formation of armored knights turn their horses toward you. You can practically hear their thoughts from across the field. There, the disrespectful peasant with the unfair weapon. Get him. Knights absolutely hate crossbowmen, not in a casual, "Oh, that guy again" way. No, they hate you with the intensity of someone who spent a fortune on armor only to find out you can puncture it like overcooked stew meat. You are the embodiment of everything they consider dishonorable: precision, efficiency, and technology they don't personally understand. So when they charge at you. Now, charging knights are terrifying for most soldiers. The earth trembles, the horses roar, the lances lower. It's dramatic, cinematic, powerful. But for a crossbowman, it's more like, oh good, I have 20 seconds to load, aim, fire, and run for my life. Here's what usually happens. You spot the charge, your commander shouts something vague like, "Hold!" and you immediately begin cranking like you're trying to win a speed contest nobody told you about. Meanwhile, your pavisier is yelling at you to hurry up. as if your crossbow has a turbo mode you've been saving for a special occasion. If everything goes perfectly, and it never does, you'll get 1, maybe 2 shots off before horseback doom reaches your position. This is where the brilliance of the crossbow shines. Even one well-placed bolt can shatter the charge. Take out a knight's horse, and you turn a prestigious nobleman into a very confused pedestrian. Take out the knight himself, and you turn their entire formation into a panic-filled parade. But if you miss, well, you run. Quickly, because the knights aren't coming to capture you. They're coming to make an example of you. And the example is always, don't anger heavily armoured nobles. Your own infantry often forms a protective line in front of you, partly out of strategy and partly out of sheer pity. After all, they know you can't reload on the move. You're basically holding a massive wooden smile of encouragement at that point. Still, when your bolt hits, really hits, you become the most important soldier on the field. Knights scatter, horses fall, commanders rethink their lives. For one glorious moment, the battlefield bends to the will of your single, precise shot. Of course, 10 seconds later, you're back to cranking again. And the knights are definitely not done hating you. When the battle finally ends, and assuming you haven't been trampled, skewered, or dramatically shouted at by a dying knight, you enter the second most exhausting part of your job, the aftermath. Victory in medieval warfare isn't a triumphant parade for a crossbowman. It's more like, great, you survived. Now get back to work. First comes the cleanup. Not of bodies, that's someone else's depressing hobby, but of your weapon. A crossbow after battle looks like it has fought nature itself. Mud in the groove, dust in the lock, sweat on the stock, and a string that has aged about 20 years in 2 hours. You sit down, exhausted, wipe your brow, and start cleaning like a medieval janitor with trust issues. Because if you don't, that string will snap the next time you pull it back, and you'll lose a thumb. Maybe 2. Meanwhile, the knights are celebrating, even if all they did was charge twice, fall off a horse once, and yell inspirational slogans from the back. Longbowmen brag about how many arrows they loosed, accuracy conveniently not mentioned. Infantry brag about how they held the line, even though several spent the battle hiding behind your pavise. And you? You get a nod, if you're lucky. Your commander may grudgingly praise you for taking down an important target, but it's the sort of praise that sounds more like he's annoyed you were right. Something like, good shot, crossbowman. Next time, aim faster. Yes, thank you. Very motivating. Then there's the scavenging. Victory means loot, and loot means every soldier instantly transforms into a bargain hunter at a chaotic flea market. The knights grab the best armor and weapons. The infantry grab useful odds and ends. The longbowmen hunt for arrows to reuse. You hunt for bolts, because those things are expensive, hard to make, and you definitely missed a few. So now you're crawling around in the dirt looking for small metal objects while everyone else celebrates like it's harvest festival. Food is next. A victory meal usually consists of the same stale bread and questionable stew you had before the battle, just slightly warmer and with more shouting. But somehow it tastes better because you're still alive. At sunset, when the shouting dies down, you sit with your crossbow beside you like an old friend. You survived another day, another battle, another round of cranking, aiming and dodging anything with hooves. You're tired, sore, and mildly traumatized. But you also know one thing. Without you, that victory might never have happened. And tomorrow, when the marching starts again, you'll do it all over. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air feels thinner and the silence feels older, a lone woman climbed the steps of the Temple of Apollo. She was not royalty. She owned no army. She possessed no wealth. And yet, the moment she sat upon the sacred tripod, she became the most powerful voice in the ancient world. This woman was the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi, feared, revered, and whispered about from the rocky islands of the Yrian to the courts of distant kings. The sanctuary itself felt like a place where reality bent. Laurel leaves crackled in the fires, filling the chamber with their sweet, sharp scent. Bowls of burning incense released slow, rolling waves of smoke. The stone walls were carved with maxims. Know thyself, nothing in excess, give a pledge and ruin is near. Every traveller entering the temple felt watched, not by the priests, but by something older and unseen. The Pythia prepared in ritual silence. She bathed in the Castalian spring, chewed fresh laurel leaves, and drank from the Casotis waters believed to carry Apollo's divine essence. Only then would she descend into the Aditon, the inner chamber. Here, a fissure in the earth exhaled vapours, sweet, strange, and disorienting. The ancients believed these were the breath of Apollo himself. When she mounted the tripod, everything changed. Her eyes grew distant, unfocused, but not blind. Her breath deepened. Her body swayed. Priests stood ready around her, waiting to catch each muttered syllable. It wasn't always words. Sometimes she whispered. Sometimes she cried out. Sometimes she sank into a trance so deep she seemed suspended between worlds. Whatever sounds escaped her lips, the priests interpreted as a message from Apollo. Supplicants, kings, generals, desperate fathers, ambitious tyrants, waited outside for her prophecy. And they waited with fear, not excitement. Because the Pythia didn't flatter. She didn't soothe. She delivered truth wrapped in riddles, and those riddles shaped the future. A single sentence from her could launch a war, crown a king, or destroy a dynasty. To the Greeks, she wasn't merely a woman. She was Apollo's chosen mouthpiece, the bridge between mortals and a god who rarely spoke directly. And as she inhaled the temple's swirling vapours, and let her voice blur into something no longer fully human, the world outside held its breath. Because when the Pythia spoke, fate itself listened. No one simply walked in to consult the Oracle of Delphi. The process felt less like visiting a holy site and more like preparing to negotiate with the universe itself. Pilgrims approached Delphi by ascending the sacred way, a winding path lined with treasuries, statues, and offerings from every corner of the Greek world. Each gift, gold, bronze, shields, tripods, told a story of someone who had once stood where you were now standing, desperate for answers. The first step was purification. Before a single question could be asked, supplicants washed themselves in the icy waters of the Castalian spring. Some claimed the water sharpened the senses. Others suspected it simply jolted them awake after days of travel. Either way, purification was mandatory. The gods, especially Apollo, did not entertain the unwashed. Next came sacrifice. A goat, always a goat, was sprinkled with cold water. If it shivered, the gods approved. If it didn't react, tough luck. The session was cancelled, the temple closed, and you went home with more questions than you arrived with. Assuming the goat cooperated, and goats are notorious for being dramatic, it was slaughtered, its entrails read, and the omens interpreted. Only then could a petition proceed. But prophecy was not a casual purchase. You needed an offering, something valuable enough to show Apollo you weren't wasting his time. Wealthy kings brought gold. City-states delivered bronze statues. Regular people, well, they offered what they could. Bread, oil, wool, maybe a small sacrifice. The priests didn't judge. Apollo did. Inside the temple, the atmosphere became heavy, even intimidating. The priests of Delphi, who managed the oracle's operations, took your name, your origin, your question, and your offering. They were the gatekeepers, the interpreters, the logistical backbone of a divine bureaucracy. Without them, the Pythia's trances would have been indecipherable bursts of ecstatic energy. With them, her words became political weapons and spiritual guideposts. Finally came the question, the reason for your journey. You were instructed to ask it carefully, clearly, and respectfully. Many rehearsed for days, terrified of phrasing it poorly. After all, the gods were known to take things literally, twist meanings, and punish arrogance. You didn't come to Delphi hoping for a friendly chat. You came hoping not to anger a deity. And then, when all was ready, when the sacrifices burned, the incense curled upward, and the laurel branches rustled, you were led toward the Aditon. The Pythia waited. The air vibrated with expectation. Your life, your ambitions, even your survival. All of it now hinged on a single, cryptic answer from Apollo's chosen voice. To the ancient world, the Pythia's trance was nothing less than divine possession. But to those who witnessed it up close, it was a scene both mesmerizing and unsettling, half sacred ritual, half raw human surrender to forces beyond comprehension. The Aditon, the temple's innermost chamber, was a world apart. Torches flickered against stone walls inscribed with prayers and warnings. Laurel leaves burned in bronze bowls, releasing a crackling perfume that clung to your lungs. And at the center of it all stood the sacred tripod, a three-legged bronze seat perched directly above a natural fissure in the earth. The Pythia descended alone. No priest entered with her. This moment belonged to her and the god. Before she sat, she performed the preparatory rites, chewing laurel leaves to receive Apollo, sprinkling holy water over the tripod, and invoking the god with a low rhythmic chant. Her breathing deepened, her posture changed, and as she climbed into position, you could feel a shift in the air, like the temple itself was waiting. The vapors rising from the fissure were key to ancient belief. Whether they were divine, geological, or psychological, one truth remains. Everyone who entered that chamber described the sensation as intoxicating, sweet, strange, thick, almost like the world itself was dissolving around the edges. Modern debate aside, the Greeks were certain these fumes were Apollo's breath, carrying visions from the realm of gods into the fragile human mind. As the Pythia inhaled, her body began to sway. Not violently, but rhythmically, like someone drifting between consciousness and dream. Her voice changed next. It softened, then sharpened, then broke into fragmented phrases. To her, the world of ordinary sound and reason disappeared. In its place rose flashes of imagery, burning cities, rising kings, storm-tossed ships, triumphant armies, doomed ambitions. She saw patterns others could not, threads of fate woven together in ways no mortal could untangle. When she finally spoke, it did not sound like a conversation. It sounded like incantation. Sometimes she whispered as though confiding in shadows. Sometimes she cried out like the words forced their way through her, tearing through her voice. Priests waited just beyond the chamber, listening through the doorway, catching every syllable and mapping it into structured prophecy. To witnesses, it looked like madness. To believers, it was communion. To the Greeks, this was the exact moment Apollo entered the world. Not with lightning or miracles, but through the trembling voice of one mortal woman seated on a tripod above the earth's breath. And what she said next could reshape history. When the Pythia spoke, her voice traveled far beyond the stone walls of the temple. Her prophecies didn't just answer questions. They shaped the ambitions of kings, redirected armies, and rewrote the political map of the ancient world. Leaders who commanded thousands bowed before a single woman seated on a tripod. Because everyone understood one thing: Apollo did not lie. But he also did not make anything easy. The most famous rulers of antiquity approached Delphi with reverence and dread. They didn't come for comfort. They came for truth disguised as riddles, truth that could justify a war or destroy a kingdom. Take King Croesus of Lydia, wealthiest man alive, owner of mountains of gold. The kind of ruler who believed fortune itself bent around him. He asked the oracle the simplest question a warlord can ask: "If I attack Persia, will I win?" The Pythia answered, "If you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire." Croesus took it as a green light. He marched forward, he attacked, and he absolutely did destroy a great empire, his own. The Pythia wasn't wrong. He just assumed the universe liked him more than it did. Xerxes of Persia, preparing his vast invasion of Greece, also sent envoys to Delphi. He expected fear, submission, perhaps even flattery. Instead, the Pythia issued warnings so dire that even the Persians hesitated. She spoke of cities burning, gods turning their backs, and divine wrath falling like a storm. Xerxes pressed on anyway, because arrogance is a powerful antidote to wisdom. But Delphi's words haunted the campaign, especially as Greek resistance stiffened in ways he never predicted. Even the great city-states treated her pronouncements as strategic assets. Corinth, Athens, Sparta, all sent delegations with gifts, hoping Apollo would favor them with clarity. Sparta, for example, consulted the oracle before the Persian wars. The prophecy that came back was stark. Either a Spartan king must die, or Sparta would fall. Leonidas marched to Thermopylae with that knowledge etched into his fate. He knew what he was doing. The oracle had already told him. To the ancients, the Pythia didn't predict the future. She revealed the paths that already existed. She wasn't responsible for the choices kings made. But she held up the mirror they feared to look into. Every prophecy carried weight. Every word carried risk. And every leader who left Delphi carried the unsettling realization that Apollo's truth had no obligation to fit their desires. The oracle didn't serve kings. Kings served the oracle. For all her divine authority, the Pythia did not operate alone. Behind the mystical glow of the oracle stood a cadre of priests, highly educated, politically connected, and astonishingly skilled at turning cryptic utterances into polished prophecies. If the Pythia was the voice of Apollo, these men were the translators, editors, and very strategic middlemen who shaped how her words rippled across the Greek world. The Delphic priesthood acted as the first line of interpretation. When the Pythia fell into her trance and released raw, unfiltered fragments, sometimes poetic, sometimes chaotic, they listened with trained ears. To them, her murmurings were not gibberish, but a form of cosmic shorthand. They took those divine fragments and moulded them into structured responses, written in elegant Greek hexameter. The result sounded both sacred and authoritative, the kind of language mortals associated with gods. But the priests did more than translate. They controlled access. Not every question was permitted. Not every supplicant was worthy. It was the priests who decided who entered the temple, who waited, who paid, and who asked what. They kept records, monitored political tensions, and understood the power dynamics between Greek polis better than most ambassadors. In an age without newspapers or global communication, Delphi was the information hub of the Mediterranean. Envoys from every city-state passed through its gates, bringing with them news, fears, rumours, and ambitions. The priests absorbed all of it. This meant they understood context, sometimes more clearly than the rulers asking the questions. When a city-state quarrelled with its neighbour, the priests often knew about troop movements, alliances, and secret treaties before the generals themselves. When a king sought expansion, they already knew whether the gods approved, based on how the political winds were blowing. Their interpretations were not mere translations. They were guided by a deep understanding of human behaviour and international strategy. This is what made Delphi so powerful. Apollo's voice may have been divine, but its delivery was sharp, informed, and precise. The oracle's greatest strength wasn't just prophecy. It was the fusion of mystical authority with political intelligence. And yet, the priests did not see themselves as manipulators. They believed they were clarifying Apollo's truth, not steering it. Their duty was to ensure the message reached the world with the proper weight and clarity. In the end, it was a perfect partnership. The god who sees all, the woman who channels his voice, and the priests who turn revelation into strategy. Through this triad, Delphi became not just a sanctuary, but the unseen hand guiding the ancient world. If there is one thing everyone agreed on, it was this. The Oracle of Delphi did not do clarity. She did not say yes or no. She did not tell you what you wanted to hear. Instead, she spoke in riddles, maddening, poetic, frustrating riddles that kings spent entire nights trying to decode. And this wasn't an accident. It was the very essence of how Apollo communicated with mortals. To the Greeks, the gods didn't see the world the way humans did. Mortals wanted simple answers. Gods dealt in cosmic balance, destiny, and consequences. A straight answer might trap someone into a path they weren't meant to take, or worse, allow them to misuse divine knowledge. So Apollo spoke in riddles, not to confuse, but to force reflection. He didn't choose your fate. He forced you to confront your own choices. The famous examples are legendary for a reason. When Croesus asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle didn't say, "Terrible idea, don't do it." Instead, she said, "If you cross the Halys River, you will destroy a great empire." This was technically correct. Croesus just assumed the empire would be Persia, not his own. The riddle was never wrong, his interpretation was. Then there was the prophecy given to Athens before the Persian invasion. Trust in the wooden walls. What did it mean? A wall of timber? The ships of their navy? A barricade? Panic spread. Debate erupted. Eventually Themistocles concluded the wooden walls referred to Athens' fleet. He was right. That interpretation led to the Greek victory at Salamis, one of the most important battles in history. The oracle's riddles forced leaders to think, strategize, and confront their own assumptions. A direct prophecy might have made them reckless. A riddle made them cautious. But the riddles served another purpose: protection. Not just spiritual, but political. A vague prophecy could not be directly blamed on the oracle if things went wrong. If a king made a disastrous decision, he couldn't accuse Apollo of giving bad advice, only himself for misunderstanding it. This kept the sanctuary safe from retaliation and maintained the aura of divine infallibility. People didn't just go to Delphi for answers. They went for perspective, for a glimpse into the grand, unsettling truth that fate was not linear and destiny was not simple. A riddle from Apollo was a mirror, one that forced each person to see their own flaws, ambitions, and illusions. And whether the prophecy led to triumph or ruin, one fact remained. The oracle never lied. Humans merely heard what they wanted. To understand the power of the Oracle of Delphi, you have to look beyond the mystical vapors and cryptic phrases. Her true influence lay in how entire nations reshaped themselves based on her words. The Oracle wasn't just a religious figure. She was a diplomatic engine, a geopolitical force, and at times, the quiet architect of history. City-states rarely made major decisions without first sending envoys to Delphi. Should they declare war, form an alliance, found a colony, reform their laws? Even practical matters, crop failures, plagues, earthquakes, were brought before the Pythia. In a world without science, strategy, or reliable communication, Delphi served as the central nervous system of the Greek world. One example: colonization. When city-states sought to expand, they went straight to the Oracle. She didn't hand out maps or instructions, but she provided crucial symbolic approval. The founding of Yrian, one of the wealthiest Greek colonies in Africa, began with a Delphic prophecy. The Oracle told the settlers to sail toward a rich land where the soil drinks the dew of heaven. It was vague, poetic, and entirely Delphic, but it gave the expedition legitimacy. Colonists would risk their lives on the sea if Apollo endorsed the journey. Politics were equally shaped by her voice. When Sparta considered whether to adopt its dual kingship and new legal reforms, the Oracle supported the efforts of Lycurgus, the legendary lawgiver. Suddenly, Sparta's entire identity, from its military discipline to its austere culture, gained divine backing. Apollo wasn't just a distant god, he was a co-author of Spartan society. Delphi also acted as a diplomatic pressure valve. Rival city-states often sought arbitration from Apollo. The priests and the Pythia would deliver carefully worded responses that encouraged compromise without directly taking sides. It wasn't neutrality, it was divine statesmanship. But her influence was strongest in times of crisis. Before the Persian Wars, the Oracle issued prophecies that forced Greek leaders to face their mortality. For Athens, she warned of fire and destruction, yet also promised salvation through wooden walls, which pushed them toward naval warfare. For Sparta, she declared that a king must die to save the city, shaping Leonidas's fateful march to Thermopylae. Even international powers recognized Delphi's importance. Lydia, Persia, Miletus, Egypt, foreign kings sent gifts, hoping to sway Apollo's favor, or at least gain insight into Greek intentions. The Oracle became an informal intelligence network, long before espionage existed as a profession. Through riddles and warnings, she didn't just respond to history, she steered it, nudged it, guided it, and the ancient world moved accordingly. For nearly 1,000 years, the Oracle of Delphi shaped the ancient world, but no power, divine or mortal, remains untouchable forever. The decline of the Pythia wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow, creeping unraveling, woven from politics, skepticism, war, and the shifting spiritual landscape of an aging civilization. The first cracks appeared during the rise of classical rationalism. Philosophers like Xenophanes and Heraclitus questioned whether gods truly spoke through mortals. Herodotus admired the oracle, but even he hinted that priests could shape the messages. Athens, growing in power and pride, no longer sought divine approval for every political gamble. The world was changing, fast, and gods did not adapt as quickly as people. But skepticism alone didn't bring Delphi down. War did. The sacred wars, 3 brutal conflicts fought over control of the oracle, dragged Delphi into the mud of Greek politics. City-states exploited the sanctuary's prestige to justify their ambitions. Armies marched across sacred ground. Treasuries were looted. Apollo's temple, once protected by myth, became a battlefield prize. Even as the Pythia continued to deliver prophecies, many Greeks began to wonder, was this divine guidance or political manipulation? Then came the rise of Macedon. Philip II, Alexander the Great's father, famously pressured the oracle for a favourable prophecy. When she resisted, he forced her physically into the Adyton. Legend says she cried out, "You are invincible!" And Philip triumphantly replied, "That is all I wish to hear." Whether true or not, the story symbolized a shift. Kings now demanded answers instead of seeking them. Under Roman rule, Delphi lost even more prestige. Rome respected Greek culture, but it had its own gods, its own seers, its own political machine. Emperors still consulted the oracle, but more out of tradition than genuine belief. Slowly, the sanctuary hollowed out. Fewer pilgrims arrived. Fewer offerings were made. Even the sacred vapors reportedly diminished as geological shifts changed the fissures beneath the temple. The final blow came with Christianity. To Christians, the oracle was not a holy voice, but a dangerous relic of paganism. The Emperor Theodosius I banned pagan rites in the late 4th century. The temple was closed, the tripod silenced. The Pythia, once the voice of Apollo, the arbiter of empires, delivered her last known prophecy during this time. When asked why she no longer spoke for the god, she said, "Tell the king, the beautiful temple has fallen. Apollo has no home, no oracle, no prophetic laurel." The god's voice faded, the sanctuary turned to ruins, and history closed its doors on Delphi. But even in silence, her legacy endured, living on in the echoes of every choice she once shaped. Even long after her temple crumbled and her tripod lay cold, the Oracle of Delphi continued to cast a long shadow over the ancient world, and remarkably, over our own. The Pythia may have fallen silent, but her voice echoes through history in ways that stretch far beyond myth, religion, or politics. Her legacy is a reminder of how profoundly humans crave meaning, guidance, and connection to something larger than themselves. To the Greeks, she was more than a prophet. She was a symbol of the fragile bridge between mortal uncertainty and divine order. People traveled across oceans, climbed mountains, emptied treasuries, and endured years of waiting, all for a few words from a woman seated above a crack in the earth. The power of Delphi was not just in the accuracy of its predictions, but in the authority it held over human imagination. She gave shape to the unknown. She made the chaotic world feel readable, if only slightly. Delphi's influence seeped into literature, philosophy, and law. Aeschylus and Sophocles wove her riddles into their tragedies. Her warnings shaped the moral universe of Greek drama, where pride, fate, and divine justice collided. Plato referenced the oracle often. Socrates himself famously defined his mission based on a Delphic pronouncement that called him the wisest of men, because he knew nothing. Even the famous inscription, "Know thyself," carved into the temple wall, became a foundational pillar of Western thought. Politically, the oracle's legacy is equally vast. Her ability to unite, or divide, city-states made Delphi an ancient diplomatic powerhouse. Modern historians see her as the center of a massive soft power network, one that influenced wars, treaties, and colonization centuries before the concept of international relations existed. In a way, she was the first global consultant, cryptic, expensive, and always in demand. Spiritually, her influence can be felt in every later tradition of prophecy, mysticism, and divine intermediaries. From early Christian visions to medieval saints, from Renaissance occultism to modern fascination with psychics and spiritual guides, Humanity's desire to hear a voice from beyond can be traced back to places like Delphi, where the boundary between mortal and divine once seemed thin enough to cross. Today, the ruins of Delphi lie quiet beneath the Greek sun. Tourists walk the sacred way where kings once trembled. The temple's stones sleep, the air is still, and Apollo's voice has been silent for centuries. Yet the story of the Pythia endures, not as a relic, but as a testament to the timeless human hunger for guidance, fate, and mystery. Her tripod may be empty, but her power still resonates in every question we ask about the future. For the Yrians, strength was not a luxury or a hobby. It was the backbone of survival, the language of tribal honor, and the currency of leadership. In a land defined by mountains, dense forests, roaring rivers, and unpredictable weather, a weak body was not just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Every valley, every ridge, every cliff demanded endurance. And so the Yrians grew into people shaped not by choice, but by necessity. An Yrian didn't train to look impressive. He trained because the landscape itself demanded obedience. Children weren't eased into athletic life, they were thrown into it. A boy might learn to run on steep hills long before he ever learned to write his own name. A girl could swim across cold mountain rivers before she knew how to weave. Strength was an expectation, endurance a requirement, resilience the closest thing Illyria had to religion. They were not sculpted like Greek athletes, proudly posing in marble perfection. The Illyrian ideal was wilder, rougher, built from uneven terrain and constant hardship. Their muscles came from lifting stones while building hill forts, wrestling livestock, carrying heavy gear through dense forests, and running messages between tribes. In Illyria, you didn't hire a trainer, you just lived. Warrior culture ran deep. Every tribe expected its youth to grow into capable defenders of the clan. This wasn't a world of professional armies. It was a world where nearly every man was expected to fight when the horn sounded. Athleticism was therefore inseparable from martial skill. A good runner could outmaneuver an enemy. A strong swimmer could cross rivers during raids. A skilled rider could bring news or death faster than anyone else. The body was a weapon, and training it was a sacred duty, and behind it all was pride, tribal pride. Competitions weren't polite games. They were tests of strength that could elevate your family's reputation. A single victory in a spear-throwing contest could earn you a place in the stories recited around the fire. Winning a hill race could secure marriage prospects. Wrestling triumphs could turn a young warrior into a local legend before he ever entered his first battle. Physical skill wasn't just admired, it was celebrated, demanded, woven into the fabric of Illyrian identity. To be Illyrian was to endure, to strain, to sweat, to push your limits against the land itself. And in doing so, a young warrior didn't just build strength, he earned his place among his people. If the Greeks ran in stadiums and the Romans raced chariots, the Illyrians raced the earth itself. Hill racing, sprinting up brutal inclines, rocky ridges, and uneven mountain trails, was one of the most important athletic traditions across Illyrian tribes. It wasn't a sport created for entertainment. It was training disguised as glory, a ritual born from the reality that Illyria was a land where every village sat on a hill, and every battle required climbing one. To an outsider, watching an Illyrian hill race looked like witnessing a controlled descent into madness. The runners weren't lightly jogging across smooth terrain. They were charging up slopes that made goats reconsider their life choices. Feet slammed into loose soil, sliding stones scattered beneath them, and the air thinned with altitude. But Yrians knew how to use the terrain. They used their arms for balance, leaned forward to dig into the incline, and cut sideways along natural ridges to conserve stamina. These races were far more than athletic contests. They were cultural events. Tribes gathered on festival days to celebrate with feasts, songs, and challenges. Young warriors lined up at the starting point, bare-chested or wearing simple tunics, their bodies already marked by years of running these hills. Elders stood nearby, watching with the keen eyes of men who had survived raids, wars, and harsh winters. They weren't merely observing, they were evaluating. A young man who ran well could be trusted to survive ambushes, deliver messages, and outpace enemies. A fast runner wasn't just admired, he was strategically valuable. Women raced too in many tribes, though their competitions were shorter and often tied to rites of passage. A girl who could sprint up a steep incline without stopping was celebrated as someone with a warrior's endurance and a mother's resilience. Two traits Yrians equally respected. The finish line was rarely a simple straight path. Runners might have to climb over rocky outcrops, scramble across narrow ledges, or surge up a final impossible slope to reach a cairn or sacred tree. Spectators cheered, shouted insults, or drummed on shields to intensify the competition. The first to touch the marker received not just applause but symbolic rewards: a new spear shaft, a decorated belt, a wreath of mountain herbs, or the honor of leading ritual dances. More importantly, victory earned prestige. Families boasted for years about a champion runner. Warriors with hill racing titles often received better positions in raids and greater respect in councils. In Illyria, the land itself was the opponent, and conquering the land was the first victory of every warrior. If the mountains shaped the Illyrians' legs, the rivers shaped their lungs. Illyria was carved by fast, cold, unpredictable waters, rivers that did not gently flow so much as roar with personality. For the Yrians, mastering these rivers was essential. Swimming wasn't a leisure activity, it was a survival skill, a strategic advantage, and a cultural badge of honor. Illyrian river training usually began in childhood. There were no instructors, no gentle lessons, no waiting for warmer weather. A father or older brother simply pointed at the river and said something to the effect of, "Go on, swim or sink." The child who made it across earned applause, claps on the back, and a place beside the fire. The one who hesitated would try again tomorrow, because in Illyria you had to learn. Raids, hunting, herding, trading, warfare, so much relied on being able to cross rivers quickly and safely. The rivers themselves were not forgiving. They were ice cold, even in summer. They hid slippery stones, strong currents, and sudden drops. But Illyrian swimmers developed techniques perfectly adapted to them. The mountain stroke involved keeping the body low to the water, fighting the current with short, powerful motions. They learned to dive deep to avoid arrows, or to approach unseen during ambushes. They learned to float silently, using only their legs. They even trained to swim while holding a spear, shield, or pack of supplies on their backs. Competitions naturally arose from this constant contact with water. River games were common during festivals. Who could swim the fastest across a dangerous channel? Who could retrieve a stone from the deepest point? Who could stay underwater the longest? Spectators lined the banks, cheering wildly, shouting predictions, or mocking friends who lost their breath too early. The most dramatic contests involved river crossing races. Warriors lined up at one bank, weapons in hand, and plunged into the current at the signal. The first to climb out the other side, soaked, shivering but triumphant, proved not just athletic skill, but the ability to adapt under pressure. These races resembled military drills more than games. Many Yrian war tactics relied on sudden river crossings, surprising enemies who assumed the water would slow them down. Even children developed games around water, diving for beads, racing floating branches, or building makeshift rafts to test their balance. By adulthood, an Yrian could navigate rivers with the same confidence others felt on land. To outsiders, Yrian swimmers seemed fearless, almost reckless. But to the tribes, river mastery meant freedom. Freedom to move, to fight, to survive. And in Illyria, survival was the greatest athletic achievement of all. If Illyrian legs were forged by hills and their lungs hardened by rivers, their arms were tempered by the relentless practice of throwing. The Yrians were famous across the Balkans and beyond for their accuracy with spears, javelins and heavy stones, projectiles that required far more than brute strength. These were weapons of precision, instinct, and a kind of tribal rhythm passed down through generations. Every Illyrian boy, and many girls, grew up throwing something. Spears into wooden targets, stones at tree trunks, javelins into straw bundles. Even simple sticks became training tools. To an Illyrian elder, the accuracy of a young warrior's throw revealed more about his future than any omen or priest ever could. A precise arm meant hunting success. It meant survival on raids. It meant the difference between returning home with honor or not returning at all. Training began early. Children started with short, lightweight spears, practicing their grip and stance until they could throw without thinking. As they grew older, the weapons grew heavier, and the targets moved farther away. Warriors taught them how to adjust for wind, how to judge distance, how to throw while running, and, most importantly, how to throw while under pressure. It wasn't enough to hit a target in peace. You had to hit it while your heart raced, while your breath burned, while your enemies closed in. Because real battles weren't still. Neither were Illyrian games. Tribal competitions transformed spear throwing into spectacle. Long fields were marked with stones or carved totems, each representing a distance challenge. Warriors competed for accuracy, distance, and technique. A champion spear thrower didn't just win a prize, he became a tribal asset. His name carried weight. His victories were repeated around fires long after the games ended. But if spears trained precision, stones trained raw power. Illyrians lifted, carried, and hurled stones the way other cultures lifted weights. Large river stones, rough and irregular, were favored because they demanded both strength and technique. Some villages even kept challenge stones, massive boulders that only a few warriors could lift onto their shoulders. A man who could throw a heavy stone farther than his rivals instantly earned respect. A man who could lift the challenge stone gained something even more valuable, a reputation. Combat games tied all of this together. Mock battles with blunted spears or wooden staves helped warriors practice timing, distance control, and footwork. Young fighters learned what it meant to throw, dodge, and recover in the chaos of movement. Skills that translated directly onto real battlefields. For the Illyrians, a strong arm wasn't cosmetic. It was a symbol of readiness, courage, and tribal pride. Every throw was a reminder. A warrior's value was measured not only in strength, but in what he could make fly through the air with deadly accuracy. Among all Illyrian athletic traditions, none earned more admiration or fear than horsemanship. In the rugged highlands, where cliffs met river valleys and villages clung to steep slopes, the horse was more than a tool. It was a symbol of mobility, status, and sheer tribal pride. To ride well was to declare yourself a true warrior. To ride poorly was to invite mockery for years. Illyrian horsemanship stood apart from the polished cavalry traditions of the Greeks or the regimented style of the later Romans. Illyrians rode like the land itself, wild, instinctive, and fearless. Their horses were smaller and sturdier, bred not for elegance but for climbing slopes, navigating rocky trails, and surviving harsh winters. These were not sleek parade animals. They were mountain companions shaped by a brutal environment. Training began early. Children learned to ride without saddles, gripping the horse with their thighs and balancing through instinct rather than equipment. They practiced leaning forward on steep inclines, pulling back on descents, and maneuvering through forests with tree branches whipping past their faces. Riding was not a separate skill. It was woven into daily life, herding livestock, scouting territory, delivering messages between tribes, or simply racing for the thrill of it. And racing was a spectacle. Illyrian horse races were chaotic, exhilarating, and unpredictable. Everything a tribe valued. There were no smooth tracks, no cheering stadiums. The racecourse might be a narrow mountain path, a riverbank, or a sloping meadow with hidden dips and dangerous turns. Riders didn't use bridles or reins in the Greek sense. They guided their horses with pressure, weight, and voice commands honed from years of shared trust. Spectators gathered on cliffs, terraces, or hilltops to watch. They shouted advice, insults, or encouragement, depending on how much they liked the rider. Betting was common, not with coins but with goods, knives, tools, livestock, or even promises of future favor. Winning wasn't just about speed, it was about control. A rider who could maneuver tight turns, maintain balance, and recover from missteps earned enormous respect. Warriors also practiced mounted spear throwing and javelin games, combining two essential skills into one deadly display. The best riders could hurl a spear at full gallop and strike a target with frightening accuracy. These drills directly prepared them for raids and skirmishes where speed and precision meant survival. To the Yrians, a skilled rider embodied freedom, power, and noble fierceness. A man on horseback towered above the world, commanding space and movement in ways that resonated deeply with tribal values. In a land ruled by hills and horizons, the rider was king long before crowns ever arrived. If daily life forged Illyrian strength, it was the festivals that revealed it. These were not simple gatherings with polite applause and tidy competitions. Illyrian athletic festivals were thunderous, chaotic, exuberant celebrations where tribes measured themselves against each other in feats of endurance, courage, and barely restrained aggression. To outsiders, they looked like warrior auditions. To Yrians, they were the beating heart of tribal pride. Festivals usually coincided with major seasonal events: spring's first blooms, summer harvests, the honoring of ancestors, or the marking of alliances. Families traveled from distant valleys, tribes raised colorful banners, and chieftains organized days of food, music, drink, and contests. The air buzzed with excitement. Drums echoed. Fires burned through the night. It was a time when grudges simmered, friendships strengthened, and reputations were forged. The tribal arena wasn't a literal stadium. It was any large open space, a meadow at the base of a hill, a riverbank, or even the flattened top of a mountain ridge. Spectators formed a rough circle, leaving the center free for athletes to test their skill. Warriors wore tunics dyed in tribal colors, decorated belts, or tattoos representing victories. Even the youth painted themselves with ash and earth, eager to prove they belonged among future champions. Events were diverse and often intense. Wrestling was a highlight, grappling matches that showcased raw power and cunning. Illyrian wrestlers fought barefoot, bodies oiled or dusted, gripping each other's limbs in lightning-fast attempts to throw an opponent to the ground. The crowd roared at every takedown. A single spectacular throw could earn a warrior weeks of bragging rights. Spear-throwing contests were equally respected. Targets ranged from wooden shields to tree trunks, or even bundles of straw shaped like enemies. Competitors were judged on accuracy, distance, and form. Sometimes tribes sent their best champions against each other in head-to-head duels, each throw building tension as the crowd urged them on. Then came endurance trials, long-distance hill races, river-crossing relays, and stone-lifting challenges pushed bodies to their limits. An Yrian who collapsed from exhaustion was mocked mercilessly, but only until the feast began. An Yrian who triumphed had his name shouted around the fires until sunrise. Women participated too, especially in certain tribes. They competed in sprints, river races, and throwing games, demonstrating agility, speed, and grit. Their victories brought honor not only to themselves, but to their entire lineage. The festival nights were equally intense. Victories were celebrated with music, feasting, and storytelling. Elders recited the achievements of past champions. Young warriors replayed the day's victories with exaggerated flair. Families exchanged gifts, alliances were strengthened, and sometimes marriages were arranged between tribes impressed by each other's athletes. In these festivals, Illyria's athletic spirit reached its peak, a fierce celebration of body, tribe, and the land that shaped them. For the Yrians, athletic skill wasn't something that existed apart from warfare. It was the backbone of it. Every hill sprint, every spear throw, every river crossing served a double purpose, strengthening the body and sharpening it for the brutal realities of tribal conflict. In Illyria, the line between athlete and warrior was thin, sometimes invisible. A champion in the arena was often the same man leading charges on the battlefield weeks later. Illyrian warfare relied heavily on speed, coordination, and terrain mastery. Their homeland was a fortress of cliffs, forests, steep ridges, and twisting valleys. Armies that fought Yrians complained that the terrain itself felt alive, always rising, falling, twisting. But to an Yrian, these obstacles were familiar. They had raced those slopes as children, carried stones across them, and sprinted them during festivals. The land punished outsiders, but it empowered Yrians. Training for war mirrored the athletic games, but intensified them. Morning drills began with uphill sprints carrying full gear, shields, spears, and packs. Warriors practiced moving silently through brush, weaving between trees, and climbing rocky outcrops. The same legs that won hill races could now charge enemy lines from above or outflank opponents faster than they could respond. Spear practice took on a more tactical edge. Athletes who once competed for accuracy now trained to throw in volleys, targeting enemy shield walls or cavalry. They learned how to judge wind, distance, and elevation during combat, not just in calm competitions. Warriors who excelled at throwing games became the elite skirmishers on the battlefield, men whose first strike often determined the outcome of a clash. River mastery also became a strategic advantage. Illyrian raiding parties were infamous for appearing where no army should logically appear, emerging dripping wet on the opposite bank of a river that scouts had sworn was impossible to cross. Their swimming drills prepared them not only for athletic glory, but for stealth maneuvers, ambushes, and unexpected retreats. Enemies could not predict Illyrian movements, because Illyrians themselves refused to be limited by nature. Horsemanship, too, transformed into military might. Riders trained to throw javelins at full gallop, wheel their horses around tight corners, and navigate narrow passes with perfect control. These riders became lightning-fast shock troops, scouts, raiders, and battlefield disruptors whose agility terrified infantry who depended on ordered lines. Even wrestling had martial value. It taught balance, grappling technique, and the ability to fight at close range when weapons broke or were lost. A warrior who could wrestle well was hard to throw from his feet, an invaluable skill on chaotic ground. For Yrians, the body was the first weapon, athletics the second, and the battlefield the ultimate arena. Their athletic culture didn't just prepare warriors, it created them, shaped by the land, hardened by tradition, and sharpened for war. To the Yrians, athletic skill was more than strength or training. It was a spiritual language. Their games were not just competitions, but rituals that connected them to their ancestors, their gods, and the land that shaped every muscle in their bodies. Strength wasn't praised only because it won battles. It was honored because it reflected harmony with the world around them. Illyrian spirituality revolved around nature, mountains, storms, rivers, forests, and sacred animals. Many tribes believed their gods lived in the high peaks, deep springs, and ancient oaks that dotted the landscape. Athletic events, especially those held on mountaintops or riverbanks, were considered offerings to these forces. Running up a hill wasn't just proving endurance, it was symbolically ascending toward the divine. Swimming across a river wasn't simply a test of lungs, it was a ritual reenactment of the soul, crossing into sacred territory. Festivals often began with purification rites. Athletes bathed in cold rivers or springs, washed with mountain herbs, or rubbed ash on their arms and legs. These weren't aesthetic choices, they were meant to cleanse bad luck, fear, or weakness. Before major contests, elders invoked the protection of local deities, pouring water or wine onto stone altars and calling for strength, clarity, and courage to guide the athletes. Tribal pride was inseparable from these rituals. Each clan believed its ancestors watched over the games. When a young warrior sprinted up a ridge or wrestled an opponent into the dust, he wasn't competing alone. He was proving himself worthy of his lineage. The Yrians believed the spirits of the brave rewarded the brave. Victories weren't accidents. They were signs of divine favor. Symbols played a central role. Laurel or oak wreaths crowned champions, not for beauty, but for their sacred associations. Painted markings, spirals, zigzags, and geometric patterns often decorated the arms and faces of competitors. These were not decorations, but charms representing protection, agility, or strength. A warrior painted in tribal symbols wasn't merely performing, he was channeling generations of power. Even the landscape was sacred. Certain hills or rivers hosted competitions year after year because they were believed to carry ancient blessings. Some stones were considered witnesses, thought to absorb the energy of great feats and pass it on to the next generation. An Illyrian warrior didn't just perform on these landscapes, he bonded with them. In this way, Illyrian athletics became a fusion of body and spirit. Strength honored the gods, endurance honored the ancestors, victory honored the tribe. To compete was to worship, to triumph was to transcend. And in Illyria, every race, every throw, every contest echoed with the heartbeat of a people bound to their land and their legends. Though the Illyrian tribes eventually fell under Roman conquest and later cultural shifts, their athletic spirit did not disappear. It lingered, woven into the fighting styles of gladiators, preserved in the traditions of Balkan Highlanders, and echoed in the way later cultures viewed strength, endurance, and honor. The Illyrians left no marble stadiums, no Greek-style gymnasia, no temples dedicated to athletic gods, but their legacy lived in bodies, in battlefields, and in the rugged landscapes that shaped European history. When the Romans encountered Illyrian warriors, they immediately noticed something. These were not soldiers shaped by formal barracks training. They were shaped by terrain, hardship, and lifelong physical culture. Roman generals admired Illyrian stamina, often recruiting them into auxiliary units that required toughness: skirmishers, scouts, river fighters, and mountain troops. The Romans even borrowed elements of Illyrian training, recognizing that their ability to run steep terrain, throw accurately, and ride aggressively translated into battlefield superiority. Some Illyrians were thrust into the gladiatorial world. Their natural strength and martial instincts made them formidable fighters in the arena. Many gladiatorial schools incorporated Illyrian-style conditioning: hill running, stone lifting, weapon throwing, because it produced resilient bodies capable of dramatic performances. Even Roman spectators noticed that Illyrian fighters moved differently: wilder, quicker, more unpredictable, trained by nature rather than coaches. Beyond warfare and spectacle, Illyrian athletic traditions influenced the cultural identity of the wider Balkan region. Centuries later, mountain communities in Albania, Montenegro, and Bosnia would preserve echoes of Illyrian endurance culture: foot races on slopes, stone lifting contests at weddings and festivals, and horseback competitions that resembled the ancient Highland races. These traditions survived not because they were nostalgic, but because the land demanded the same skills it demanded 2,000 years earlier. Illyrian athletic values also left a psychological legacy. Strength was tied to honor, endurance to character, and physical prowess to leadership. Centuries after their tribes faded from the political stage, chroniclers still described Illyrians as fierce, tireless, and physically gifted. Even their enemies remembered them that way. Modern archaeology has revealed tools, weapons, and fortresses that illustrate the athletic lives they led. Training grounds beside hill forts, river fords designed for quick crossing, spear-throwing fields, and ceremonial spaces used for tribal festivals. These findings confirm what ancient writers like Strabo and Appian hinted at. The Illyrians lived in constant dialogue with their environment, forging bodies capable of matching its demands. In the end, the true legacy of Illyrian athletic culture isn't just in ruins or records. It's in the idea that strength comes from struggle, endurance from environment, and skill from necessity. A people shaped by mountains, rivers, and hardship left behind a legacy as rugged as their land. One that still echoes in every story told of their fearless, enduring spirit.